meeting, or for those of you who are listening live. This is the December 14th meeting of the Citywide Neighborhood Committee, and we appreciate your interest, and we hope that we'll provide some information that is of interest to everyone else. And don't hesitate to reach out to us if you find that there's some issue that you'd like us to pursue or you want to present us with. Please go ahead and contact us. So let's check the agenda, the attendance. I'll just call the roll here. Elaine Apatang, I think she was going to join us by Zoom, but maybe she's not.
No, she's
Okay.
death in the family.
Kathleen Butuk. Okay. Larry Cataldo. Will Gatchell.
Present.
Lori Sellaway.
Present.
And John Tabor. And Peter Somsich. That's me. I'm here.
Is he here?
So we have a couple of interesting things tonight that we're going to be talking about as updates, and also a couple of topics that we're going to throw out there as possibilities for us to do in the future. This is a mayor's blue ribbon committee, which means that our term is up at the end of the year, and we are required to be reappointed by the mayor if he chooses to do that in next year. And so if you think that you might be interested in being a member of our committee, you can reach out to the city, and there's a form to fill out and apply for that. So probably our next meeting in the new year will be once we know, or maybe not, who will be the new members on this committee, for those who are not choosing to stay on the committee. Anyway, I encourage you to think about that. So today we have two presentations we're going to provide you with. One I personally think is very exciting. Both of them are exciting. But I've known Bill Lyons for off and on, and it turns out that we here in Portsmouth have the distinct benefit of having a nationally acclaimed transportation expert living here in Portsmouth, who now has backed off from his international and national obligations and has put his talents to use in looking at our own Portsmouth transportation issues. And I think that's great, because I think that's a great opportunity. And he's been working for over 40 years in the transportation planning area for the U.S. Department of Transportation, as well as various other transportation projects. He's been working as well in shared mobility and also climate change related issues that connect to transportation. And he's currently on the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee for Transportation Policy. I didn't even know it existed, but now I do.
That was a was.
Oh, was, okay. And now I think there's other committees now, and in particular he's now engaged with the planned new Portsmouth Climate Action Plan that's being created, and also the Sustainability Practices Committee that is also in Portsmouth. So we are grateful to him for coming here today, and he wants to talk to us about something that he calls the Portsmouth Shuttle Loop, and I'm very curious myself to hear all about it. So welcome, Bill, and thank you very much for offering to do this.
Let's see, is it easier if I advance the slides?
So this is just a PDF.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah, I'm sure. And should I zoom in?
Yeah, that would be great. And there's a top.
Okay, great.
Good. Should I advance them, or do you want me to just?
Whatever's easier for you.
Why don't you do it, and I'm going to use the pointer. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, committee, for inviting me. This is the result of some ideas that I've been working on with a couple of different groups, Portsmouth Climate Action and the Transportation Climate Action Group, and we've been working closely with the city to come up with ideas for the new climate action plan that's close to being finalized in probably the next several weeks or month. But I'm going to be talking about some of the transportation ideas, particularly related to shared mobility, often called closely aligned with public transit. Next slide, please. So today, what I wanted to do was explore ideas for public transit in Portsmouth, particularly something that I'll call a shuttle loop, and also some other innovative types of transportation, to see if there are what the unmet needs are in Portsmouth, both now and in the future, for shared. Probably the best category is shared mobility, ride sharing. That includes everything from Uber and Lyft to minibuses to shared scooters and shared e-bikes and shared bikes and traditional buses and trains. Are there unmet needs in Portsmouth now and in the future? Is there a use case for more public transit? Are there relevant models for innovation? So I'll touch on a couple of best practices that I found really interesting and relevant for Portsmouth. Are there promising options for Portsmouth? And then I'd love, if we've got the time, to get some feedback from you, and that will help me and others interested in this topic to refine the ideas. Next slide, please. So in developing transportation ideas for the Climate Action Plan, which I'll call the city's CAP, we began with some sustainable transportation principles, really adapted from sustainability principles. The traditional definition of sustainability is the 3 E's that come out of the Brundtland UN Commission many years ago: environment, economy, and equity. That basically, for me, and for I think many other people, is the definition of sustainability. But important that it be all 3 of those at the same time, that they be balanced, that you can't just have environmental sustainability. If you're thinking about one, you have to think about all. There are trade-offs, synergies, potentially conflicts among those. And then turning to transportation, when you look at those 3 E's, you really have the opportunity to think about co-benefits. Instead of trying to solve one problem at a time, can you do something that does good in many different directions? Traditionally, transportation is considered a means to improve accessibility, how to get from where you are to where you need to go: housing, jobs, school, healthcare, recreation. Also to address the climate crisis. That's something that Portsmouth has chosen to give a priority to with the Climate Action Plan, and that will be rolled out, as I said, in the next several weeks. To support the local economy, again, back to the economy and the sustainability. One of the things I'm going to talk about is the possibility of car-free tourism and access to jobs. There's a lot of concern currently about businesses, hotels, restaurants in Portsmouth not being able to fill jobs, not being able to find workers, which ties very closely into the affordability of living in Portsmouth, affordable housing. The need to reduce the parking demand and traffic congestion. That's something that Portsmouth continues to deal with. It's probably now not the most pressing problem, but it's something that is always there, especially as the city grows. And to support, just in general, the kind of subjective view of what it means to be a livable community. And often that brings up things for Portsmouth like preserving the historic character, the ability to walk. That's really why people like to live here or like to visit the city. And then the Transportation Climate Action Group that I mentioned is TCAG. The approach that we took to developing ideas for the CAP, or climate plan, is to shift to green modes to reduce vehicle miles traveled, which is the primary source in Portsmouth of greenhouse gas emissions, probably on average in Portsmouth and around the country as much as 30%. Probably the major sector for producing greenhouse gas emissions. Then taking a systems approach. Instead of looking at each type of transportation, bikes, walking, cars, trucks, buses, Uber, in silos, fragmented, to try to look at those in terms of how to connect them together, to have a system that's the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think Portsmouth, like many other places, tends to approach these types of transportation in fragments and in silos, not really in an integrated manner. And then if we start talking about new things, additional things, and there will be new and additional things in the CAP, so critical to get public engagement and political will and support for anything, because these potentially are changes. Next slide, please. In the TCAG, Transportation Climate Action Group, developing the ideas for the climate plan, we had 4 different categories. Land use, and that has to do with density and zoning, ideas for things like 15-minute city, where you cluster different uses around housing, different types of retail, different sorts of activities, electric vehicles, improving the charging infrastructure in Portsmouth, bike and pedestrian. We have a citywide bike and pedestrian plan that needs to be updated. That's currently a proposed strategy for the CAP. And then what I'm going to talk about the rest of the time, shared mobility. And that is broadly ranging. It could be expanding current bus routes. It could be promoting ride sharing, and I'll talk a bit more about ride sharing. And also it could be a cultural shift. This city is very much tied to automobiles and parking. To do anything of great note is going to have to take people being incentivized to make those changes, and sometimes that's a matter of culture as well. Next slide. So for shared mobility, I say shared mobility / public transit in Portsmouth and the Seacoast. That's primarily bus transportation. It's Coast, which is the Seacoast Regional Bus Operator, I'm sure you're all familiar with. There's UNH Wildcat that serves the university, open to the public. And then there's CNJ, which provides commuter trips to Boston and trips to Logan Airport. My view of Coast is that they're doing a really terrific job, considering how severely limited their resources are. New Hampshire is the 49th of 50 states when it comes to state funding for public transit. The only one that's ahead of us is a rural state, Wyoming. And so we're 49th of 50 states. We spend an average of 4 cents per capita for operating public transit. The gasoline sales tax is dedicated to roads and bridges, not available for public transit, and that's different than many other states. And the end result, for cultural reasons and for funding reasons, and I think the funding reasons are really important, we have a 1.7% bus mode share, and I think that's in the Coast region rather than specifically in Portsmouth. But that's a really small number, and my guess is that 1.7%, most of those people are riders, are not occasional riders, but are regular riders. And if you really talk to all of us and the general population of Portsmouth, we're probably not riding Coast very often, unfortunately. So then the question is, could we come up with an innovative way for shared mobility to attract additional riders, to reduce the number of car trips, and to reduce Portsmouth's carbon footprint? So one approach is a shuttle loop, and I'll have a best practice example of that in a minute. That's a fixed route and a fixed schedule, except it's a loop. And Portsmouth's current bus service is really what's called radial, which is it comes in toward the center and goes out. And that many destinations you might want to go to require 2 trips or a transfer. Then the second concept for tonight, besides the shuttle loop, is microtransit. And that's something that's evolving really quickly. Traditionally, it's similar to dial-a-ride or demand response, which often is provided for elderly members of the population, people with disabilities. But this is taking that concept and making it a much broader public concept. Flexible routes, flexible scheduling, both of those rely on a single seamless platform or app for routing, scheduling, fares in real time passenger information. And that's really become quite standard. If you look at Google Maps and you say where you are and where you want to go, it's going to show you the coast routes, and it's going to tell you when coast will come near to you and pick you up. So a lot of that is really getting to be quite pervasive. The importance of public and private partnerships, and you'll see those examples in the examples that I'll give in a minute. Then thinking about the future of a connected system, and that's something that TCAG with our ideas have really tried to stress, that instead of looking at each of these as silos, the bus and the bike and pedestrian, the cars and the parking and the pricing for parking, that all that needs to be looked at as a future connected system, and that this first mile, last mile is a way to connect to the main bus route or to CNJ or to down east, and the importance of connecting and complementing to Coast, Wildcat, and CNJ. Next slide, please. So this is the Savannah DOT, Savannah DOT in Georgia. And I was inspired by this because last year my wife and I took a trip to Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina. And this system runs every 15 minutes. It's a free fare. And what's the most remarkable about it is that it's managed by a public-private partnership or association composed of the city manager, is a member of the board, the public transit agency, the operator of the main bus system, and members of private sector, particularly hospitality and restaurant industry. And they together fund this bus with funds that come out of a hotel tax that is, of course, supported by the members of the board. So this is really geared not only to serving residents, but also to supporting citizens. Next slide, please. So this is the DOT route here, and if you're familiar with Charleston, this is really the historic core here. Really nice waterfront with a walkway, lots of restaurants here, ferries that are also free, and then the route is every 15 minutes, around like that. And this is probably 2 to 3 miles, I think. And my wife and I stayed here. We took Uber to CNJ, CNJ to Logan, Logan to Savannah, Uber to our Airbnb here, and we had no car. And that was why we went here, because we didn't need a car. And it was a great trip.
Could I stand talking to a microphone for the recording?
Sure. It was a great trip, and it was memorable in large part because we didn't have to park and leave a car sitting there all the time that we were there. The purpose for Savannah DOT is to enhance Savannah experience for visitors and residents by reducing traffic and parking congestion. So you certainly could see how Portsmouth could plug in there to enhance the Portsmouth experience, to support a walking city, to serve the historic residential and business core through free fares, car-free visits for tourists. It runs 15 minutes, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, public-private partnership, and as I said, the board. And that's a 501c6 nonprofit funded through a convention district ordinance that includes a hotel tax on that. And that makes all those pieces work.
Can I ask a question then?
Yeah.
So it's an additional tax on lodging?
Yes. Yes. Next slide, please. And this is a new example. I was looking for examples of microtransit, and they're all around. To contrast microtransit to a shuttle loop, the shuttle loop is fixed schedule, fixed route, and is a loop. And the microtransit is a flexible schedule, a flexible route, pick up and drop off, arranged through an app where you go online using your phone or computer and enter where you are and where you want to go, and it will tell you when you can be picked up. It's very much like riding Uber and Lyft, except it's a shared ride, and it's very inexpensive because it's shared ride and it's public transit. It isn't private like Uber and Lyft are private. Potentially, it could be operated by Uber and Lyft or similar types of companies. This example is from Middletown, Connecticut, called the Extra Mile. It began this year as a pilot. It's on-demand smartphone request. It replaces costly fixed route. I don't know if any of you have, I do it by professional reflex. Whenever a bus goes by, I look up and see if there's anybody riding the bus. And often there aren't people riding the bus, and you think, what a shame how expensive that is. Driver, bus, depreciation, maintenance, et cetera. Interesting thing about the Extra Mile system is it has two zones. It has a downtown zone for Middletown, connecting to existing bus and rail systems. It also has a university zone funded in part by Wesleyan University. So the university students ride free. Everyone else rides for $1.75. Next slide. So what about Portsmouth? What's the use case? Well, when you look at the status quo here and you think, well, how many people are riding buses currently? How many of you are familiar with Coast? Do you ride it frequently? Do you ride it sometimes?
Sometimes.
Sometimes? Yeah, well, that's good. So you're in the 1.7% there. You know, I know a lot about Coast, but I don't use it myself, and it may be that I live fairly close to downtown, and most of my trips are walking or biking trips because I don't want to pay the heavy parking charge, or I like the exercise, or I want to go to C&J, and I have not figured out how to get there in a quick way using Coast. But for visitors, very similar to what we talked about with Savannah. Car-free trip, potentially, arrive at Logan, take C&J from Logan to Pease, get picked up by a microtransit or shuttle loop that takes you right to the hotel. No car, no demand for parking, save the expense of a rental car that you probably don't need anyway, and that then becomes a green car-free visit to Portsmouth that cities like Charleston and Savannah are prospering, offering it to their visitors. So those cities are very similar to Portsmouth. They're just bigger, but if you look at what attracts people there, it's the same thing. To partner with hotels and restaurants on marketing, perhaps on funding for residents to reduce the parking strains and the cost. In our sustainability groups, we had a sustainability fair several months ago, and I shared a table with Coast. And many people came up to talk to Coast and to me about our climate action plan suggestions. And time after time, Coast would say, "Do you use Coast?" And they would say, "No, I don't know where it goes. I don't know how to use it. I've never used it." And then she would say, "Well, where do you live?" And it turned out they live half a block away from the Coast pickup. "Do you know how much it costs?" "No. It costs $1.50. And if you're like me and you're over 65, it costs 75 cents. So why not make use of that sometimes? It doesn't mean you have to substitute and use that only, but once in a while, that then can make a difference in the greenhouse gas emissions. For affordable housing and access to jobs, the city and Portsmouth listens with a lot of support from John here, are moving ahead on a dialogue on housing needs and housing options for Portsmouth coming up next month. And in the kickoff, I'm going to be talking a short overview like this of putting housing into the context, larger context, that actually, if you look at household costs, it's not only the cost of the mortgage or the rent, it's also the cost of getting from where you are to where you need to be, particularly to jobs, and whether that's affordable. And it turns out that on average, nationally, 50% of the household cost is not just housing, but it's housing plus transportation. And then maybe you can accomplish more with housing if you save some with transit, like having a shuttle loop or a microtransit. You might be able to make something more affordable. For businesses and workers, we talked about that a bit for the hotels, restaurants, and particularly tied into affordability and workforce housing. Is it possible to cluster development along the gateway corridors like Maplewood and Lafayette Road, Route 1, and have those along transit corridors where people could save money by not having to rely on cars and parking, make that more affordable. And then for the environment, and that's an important new thing, priority for Portsmouth with this climate action plan. And I like to think about all these things. If you're talking about a use case, it isn't only one, because that really wouldn't be strong enough to justify change and improvement. It's really a package of use cases. Next slide, please. So again, looking at shared mobility for Portsmouth, we talked about the shuttle loop, potentially direct loops between the historic district, tourism, parking lots, housing, C&J, hospital, job centers, new developments, particularly housing, affordable housing that could be on some of these transit corridors. Exploring new partnerships. I think the partnerships would really need to be with the bus operators like Coast or Wildcat or C&J, particularly Coast, with businesses, schools, and the tourism industry. And then, again, looking at it in terms of connectivity, aligning the first mile, last mile, let's say, with the Portsmouth's very good bike pedestrian plan that is proposed for a major update and moving ahead on priority sections of that bike pedestrian plan in the CAP, focusing on priority corridors that could be transit-oriented corridors is a term that could be used for that, development corridors, or transit-oriented developments clustered around hubs of transit. A longer-term vision, this is really looking down the road, maybe a downtown mobility hub that would connect all modes of transportation, the microtransit, the Coast, maybe links to the Down East train, links to C&J, and then on to Logan. And then the very important current climate focus. Next. This is me having fun with Google Maps. And I used to have a lot of really good GIS data analysts working for me, and I could say, do this, do this, do this, do that, but they're not there anymore. So I can only do a few things myself. But what I could do was to say, okay, let's imagine a loop that would go from Market Square to both parking lots, out Islington to Hannaford, onto the hospital, onto C&J, then C&J back to Route 1, Lafayette, down to the Walmart, up to the Market Basket, past the high school, past the library and the middle school, and back downtown. So that would be one nice shuttle loop, because what that means is you could get on the bus and go to all those places without transferring.
On and off.
But the trouble is, this is 12 miles, and would take to drive probably 45 minutes. So certainly with a shuttle loop that's stopping to pick up people and collect fares and all that, it's going to take a while. And it's great if you live, let's say where I live, which is right about here, and I want to go downtown. Let's say maybe I want to walk and it's starting to snow and I want to take the shuttle loop back. I would have to go all the way around to get back home, unless we have two buses going in opposite directions, which then gets very expensive. And what about shuttle loops that might go on the Maplewood corridor or other corridors? So you can see it starts to get complicated. And then I started thinking about, well, there is a Coast bus that goes every hour on this. $1.50, 75 cents, it's got its own app. If you're me and you want to go to C&J, which I often did and commuted all those years to Boston, I had to drive and fight for parking at C&J, which I hated to do. I didn't need a car to just to leave it sitting there for 12 hours. But I would have had to take it into town, transfer, and get the other bus out that way. And the shuttle loop would solve that. But it got me thinking that really there's pretty decent coverage with Coast. It's just there's not a lot of it. It's not very frequent because they don't have the funds to be very frequent. And at 1.7% ridership, they don't have the people using it to justify getting more funds. So it's a vicious circle. Next slide. So the whole purpose of this presentation is food for thought, to give you some ideas and get some ideas back from you. What would be part of a package to get some of these co-benefits, to maybe have something exciting to offer for tourists, to offer something affordable that could be part of affordable housing and workforce housing to serve the residents in ways that would give them some options to having a second car or even a first car. And I started thinking, well, the shuttle loop has its potential. Maybe the best way to approach the shuttle loop is by working with Coast to redesign some of their routes. Maybe if this whole idea is focusing on better transit for Portsmouth, there should be some Portsmouth resources that could be coming from Portsmouth's own resources, whether it's the city or from businesses or from developers, to enrich what Coast is able to offer, maybe in the form of a shuttle loop. Maybe a shuttle loop in the morning, in the evening, or in the summer when things are really busy, and a regular schedule could support it. And then maybe microtransit, which is a shared ride variation of what you see with Uber and Lyft, and maybe a hybrid, some combination of that. The partnering with Coast, shuttle loop, microtransit. In the current cap, there is a proposal to do a feasibility study for this. So I hope that holds up. It's in the draft. It was in our proposal. And I hope it stays in the cap. Partnering with businesses and developers. So this is not imposing a tax that there may be, and I know I've talked to Peter about this other times. I think there are some state limitations on adding a hotel tax. But a hotel tax just gets passed on to the guests. If, like in Savannah, the hotels supported it, which they clearly do, why not have that as a voluntary tax, maybe while the state law is lobbied, advocated, and perhaps changed, because it should be for Portsmouth for a lot of reasons, and have that as a way maybe for some select hotels or restaurants to support this, to be able to be a sponsor, to get credit for it, and maybe to have the shuttle loop stop at their hotel. And it could be part of their branding for a green tourist visit. Developers as an amenity for all the new market rate developments going in, but also really if Portsmouth is concentrating on affordable housing and workforce housing, couldn't this be part of what is included in that? Because certainly if the affordable housing is on the gateway corridors like Lafayette, the cost per square foot of housing, whether it's supported with a public subsidy or by developers as a requirement, many more square feet. And if that becomes affordable because better public transit is included in the package, then that's another important use case that could be part of it. There are a lot of different ways of funding that other than just through Portsmouth's general revenue. The hospitality tax, mentioned the voluntary, developers as an amenity, something they could market at market rates, and in lieu of parking fee. So instead of requiring developers to pay Portsmouth to provide parking, they could have the option to pay Portsmouth for some of this enhanced shared mobility. There are lots of models for doing that. Development, downtown development district, use of the parking revenue, which I think by law is available for this type of use. There are lots of federal infrastructure and climate plans under the bipartisan infrastructure law and the IRA federal climate program that any of these activities would qualify for. And really pivoting off of the new climate action plan, which is a kind of a moment in time for Portsmouth because it's just about to roll out and hopefully we'll have some of these ideas in it. Next slide. And that's it. I think that I will share the slides with Peter, and maybe he can distribute those because these are our links for more information. The Transportation Climate Action Group, new members always welcome. Portsmouth's Climate Future, that's the city's page for the Climate Action Plan. The Portsmouth Housing Dialogue, which has just been posted, I think, yesterday or this week or something like that. A chance to sign up for that now, and hopefully this transportation will be part of the discussion for housing, because it isn't just the building that's important, it's where the building is and how you can get from your apartment or from your house to where you have to go. And then the Commute Smart is a very interesting public advocacy group with Coast, the Rockingham Planning Commission, and a lot of, really every public transit agency in the state, I think, is a member of that, advocating for things like state funding for public transit. So I thank you, and I yield back to Peter whether there's time for some discussion and comments.
Thank you, Bill, and definitely, we want to hear some questions and comments from anyone here, and I don't know if we have anyone online in the meantime, but anyone who, right now in the room here, if people have questions, I think Bill has raised a lot of issues, and I just want to kind of start out by emphasizing that since we are the Citywide Neighborhood Committee, I think nothing more would please us than if we could connect all these neighborhoods in some kind of joint loop. Because I know you talk about greenhouse gas emissions and transportation and so forth, but let's face it, most people coming to Portsmouth on the weekend do not live here. They come here. And we can't do much about them stopping to drive over here with their cars. But for many of us residents, even if we wanted to go into downtown occasionally, we have to drive too. And we would rather not if we had a choice.
And pay $2 an hour to park.
Yeah, and it's not, I don't even think it's the price so much as the inconvenience, because you want to know that if you go into town, you can come back at a reasonable time. You don't have to wait an hour before a bus comes or something. You'd be able to plan it better. And something like Savannah has, like you said, it's predictable.
Yeah.
I think people like to have predictability. They can plan things. So I think, at least from my perspective, I think having something that maybe is called the neighborhood loop that connects all our major neighborhoods together in one big loop, and then obviously there has to be a connection somehow to get you into town, and maybe that's a second loop. I don't know. Anyway, so that's just go ahead, Larry.
Bill, my question is, how much research has been done in Portsmouth about the demand for labor and also where employees have to live in order to work in Portsmouth?
Yeah, I don't know, other than what you hear are expressions of concern, and I don't know if that's something that the Chamber of Commerce would have from their members, or some counts other than that it seems to be a source of concern. I don't know. John, have you seen any numbers on that? Unfilled jobs? It certainly, anecdotally, you look around in restaurants that used to be open 7 days a week, that used to be open 7 days a week, or open 5 days a week, or aren't open for lunch
3 days
anymore. 3 days. Yeah.
Start for dinner instead of lunch.
Now, I think it's a very serious problem for the economy of Portsmouth, and it also it's tied in with employee housing. The idea of a loop makes certainly a lot of sense, especially if people who live in the South Portsmouth along the Lafayette Road all the way to the Rye border. There's nothing here. I've taken the trolley or coast, and I find that it's much more inconvenient now because they've had to cut back more and more. But we definitely need a viable plan. The idea of people coming from neighborhoods, even if it was a weekend shuttle, that would work. People, come home from work and they can go into town. And there's so many vacancies around, including if you walked into the building here, you saw that the city of Portsmouth has vacancies. This particular subject has not received much attention. Well, there are a lot of committees, but there definitely needs a plan, a simple plan, and I haven't seen anything of it. There's so much going on there, and even in your presentation, that people would run for cover if they said, well, gee, let's do a project. So it has to be simplified. Peter and I have talked about this. We're interested in starting a simplified plan. And I think we definitely want to talk to you a lot more about how to do that, how to map that out.
I think that there are, In my couple decades of paying close attention to this, I don't think there ever has been a Portsmouth transportation plan. There's a bike ped plan. There's a traffic and parking committee. But again, that I think falls into the category of looking at the pieces of it rather than the whole. And I think when you try to do something like, I think at one time there was a parking shuttle that connected the church out by
Community
a
church.
community church downtown, because I think of short-term parking problems, and that's a piecemeal approach. The McIntyre at one point, in discussing it with the development partner, I think, was proposing in lieu of a large number of parking spots, funding a shuttle to the two parking lots, and I think that would be a piecemeal approach as well. I'm just wondering, Peter and Larry, you mentioned the shuttle. What about something more flexible like the microtransit? Because that would certainly tell you when you're going to be picked up. The problem with the shuttle, like fixed route buses, they sometimes are off schedule or running late. I think that there is an app, which I haven't been able to use yet, that will tell you where your bus is for Coast. But just like with Uber and Lyft, this microtransit will tell you, okay, you're going to be picked up in 15 minutes or 20 minutes. It'll pick you up at your house. It'll drop you off where you're going, and then you could see it on your map. Here it comes.
I just had a question. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Please.
Oh,
But just thinking about wrestling money from, if we were to include money in a tax, in a hospitality tax, would we be able to wrestle that out of New Hampshire and out of Concord? Would that be, could that be earmarked, or is that?
I think there's two possible funding mechanisms. A pillow tax is, it's not going to happen with this legislature. It's been a heavy lift. It's been hard to get. Hampton would like it, Conway would like it, Portsmouth would like it, but the rest of the cities and towns wouldn't, maybe Manchester. But you can form a downtown district. And in the RSAs, transportation is a use that's named for a district. You need 50% of the property owners plus one to say they want to form a district. So you'd have a real selling job. But if there's enough benefits, if you can put together the use cases, hey, Jumpin' Jays can have their employees live in an apartment in the West End, not need a car, come to work downtown. Tourists arrive at Logan, take the C&J, grab the shuttle bus, don't need a car, go to the restaurant. That helps the hotels. So that's another possible funding mechanism. But, it would mean that businesses in a certain prescribed downtown area would pay an extra fee to run this service.
Would that be based on a flat fee per business? Because some businesses would really benefit highly from it, like the hotels, and others maybe not.
Yeah, see, you have to do a straight tax increment.
Yeah.
They pay an extra, 50 cents, 1,000 on the property value, or whatever it
I
is.
guess my curiosity is, would that be looped in, though, with the pillow tax that we have that we lose because it goes to the state, or?
Oh, you're talking about the rooms and meals tax?
Yeah, so if that was lumped in from the hospitality industry, would it necessitate it going to the state rather than coming to us?
No,
No?
it'd be entirely local.
Okay.
We'd form a local downtown transportation district, the way you were talking about in Middletown.
Yeah.
And
And you could segregate that from other monies.
you draw a map. You draw a line around it on the map. Everybody in that pays a little more per thousand on their property, and that money is dedicated to transportation.
If you think about a pillow tax, particularly one in a place like Charleston or Savannah, which is supported, I believe, by the hotels and the restaurants, tourist-oriented businesses, they add that to the bill that their guest pays when they check out. If there was enough enthusiasm on the part of the hospitality interest here for car-free visits, green tourism, they could do that voluntarily and add that to the bill for their guests, it would come out the same. It's just one is something that they've committed to formally through this convention group in Savannah, and that would have to be arranged maybe voluntarily. I think what we've talked about in the climate action plan is a proof of concept type of pilot. So maybe it would be easier to get that kind of commitment for a 1 or 2 year pilot to see how it goes while longer term options are being considered.
Will, I think you had a question?
Yeah, so in my work, I do a lot of master planning for communities and universities, and so the list of needs is similar to yours, right? There's hospitality, tourism, neighborhoods, workers, right? How do you address? It seems like a daunting task. There's so many areas you need to hit, and as you noted, you kind of your first stab at a loop is too big. You know,
Yeah.
how do you manage that? So what we often do is we focus on a catalyst. What's the one singular effort that can be made that will create that chain reaction that will start success? And you know, so for example, what if the focus was only hospitality? And you know, so these are people who might be traveling more than an hour, say, from where they are, and you know, what do tourists have that we don't have? Time, right? And maybe they're a little bit more flexible and waiting for a bus or public transportation, and and that could potentially also lower the net volume of cars for the locals.
Yeah.
Bring ridership up, buoy the system, allow more routes, and then start to pull more.
A sort of
you know,
benign
more.
cycle.
Yeah, just to kind of build that, and then start expanding. I mean, I love the idea of neighborhoods. I love the idea of meeting the workers' needs. But I think the challenge is finding the single need group that would be most beneficial, or that would benefit the most.
Those are good points, and it got me thinking maybe there are two needs here that could be catalysts. One would be the visitors, and I think once visitors get to Portsmouth, they probably don't use their car that much.
Right.
They come here to walk. That's what I did in Savannah, and I think people come here to stay downtown and to walk to the restaurants or museums. But I think what the missing piece really is the connection from C&J or down east, so people can come here from all around the country without a car or without the expense of renting a car. So that may be one loop, and another loop may be in neighborhoods, and maybe that's where the opportunity is for combining the neighborhoods with the development corridors, the market rate developments and the workforce or affordable housing developments along the gateway corridors, because it could serve both of those as well. So maybe it's two loops with the same bus running at different times of day or different times of the year.
So as an example, I live in the Maplewood Avenue zone, and my son's 15. He doesn't have a license yet. He works downtown at a restaurant, and if his, I mean, right now we are his transportation.
You're his
Get
boss.
door to door. We drop him off at the Worth lot and are on our way. But I think he would be willing. He has walked to work before, but even if there was, say, a hospitality loop or another type of loop, it just reduced the walk by 2/3. I think that.
Or maybe you could walk in and take the loop back, or take the
Exactly.
loop in and walk back. You know, a lot of times I'll walk downtown and maybe the weather changes or I'm tired or something, and I would enjoy taking the loop back. That might postpone your need to buy another car for him.
That's right.
Bill, I have a couple of questions, but also suggestions. Number one, and anyone who's traveled a lot in Europe will know that even in small villages where there's a bus transportation, there's a display telling you when the bus is coming, and it'll be there within a minute of that time. We are so behind.
Yeah.
We have technology out there that can do this, but we don't have the infrastructure supported enough to actually commit to that. And a good example to me was the community church shuttle. I took that shuttle, and you know that shuttle from the church to was it the parking garage? There was a clock.
Yeah.
Said, okay, it will leave every 10 minutes. I waited over 10 minutes. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Then I started walking. I walked from the community church to the parking lot. I got there before the shuttle got there.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. I mean, if you're going to put up a timer saying every 10 minutes something's coming, it better be coming, because the first time it doesn't come, you won't come back. Okay, forget it. And this is not rocket science anymore. It's been done everywhere in the world because they know people want to depend on it. It has to be reliable. And that thing was not reliable. It didn't take you very far anyway. And if I can walk it faster than it can arrive, it makes no sense. Now, the other thing is, and because we are a neighborhood committee, I particularly believe that we need to strongly advocate for our Portsmouth neighborhoods. The Chamber of Commerce is doing a good job in marketing tourism, hotels, restaurants, everything out there. In fact, our city even contributes to their marketing budget. And, you know, we don't need to market Portsmouth anymore. People are coming. And those people also have the same needs as far as transportation, but a little differently. They don't live here. So like you said, they might be coming from Boston through C&J. That's a different need. But I think restaurants particularly have taken residents for granted that they're not counting on them as being their customers. But often what happens is residents can't even get a reservation in the local restaurant because it's full of tourists. And the restaurants make profits and money. They're for-profit business. We don't get anything from that from the city. They keep it. So asking them, because we're a branded green community, to say, why don't you voluntarily kick in 50 cents on a restaurant bill or $1 on a hotel bill, so that we can create a network that benefits both residents and tourists, and we'll give you some kind of recognition for being a green hotel or a green restaurant.
You go to Acadia National Park and you take their wonderful shuttle bus around, you see the placard that says L.L. Bean.
Yeah,
Choose
yeah.
bus citizens and tourists.
So I think we need to shame them into helping our community get some resources to do things for the residents as well as for outside tourists. And I think that's why maybe two loops is the way to look at this.
I just wanted to
Yeah,
just
go ahead,
say,
Lori.
I have to get going because we're going to go look at the Christmas lights tonight.
Oh, yeah, you better do that.
Yeah, I know. So I just wanted to say, you know, thanks to everybody, but really I think I'm just going to bow out for the next, for the next tour of
So you-
duty
you don't-
for the
you're not
citywide
planning
neighborhood.
on-
I was hoping for a discussion, but we didn't really.
Well, we will have a discussion, but it's
Right,
on the
I just
agenda.
can't be a part of it. I mean, I have to leave now.
Yeah, yeah,
I
I
have to
get
go
that.
pick somebody up.
I get what you're saying, but are you saying you don't plan to be asked to be reappointed, or I mean,
Yeah,
you're
I
on the
think-
agenda to speak about it, but
I am?
yeah, we were going to speak about that after we go through the other agenda items.
Yeah. I mean, I can't do it today
Okay, well, that's
because I
fine.
have to go.
But we do need to hear from you if you don't intend
Yeah.
to stay on, because then we're going to try to reach out to other people.
Right.
Right?
I'm beginning to think that I'm just probably not going to
Okay, well, we'll touch
continue.
bases later.
I was hoping to kind of air and have
Yeah,
a
well,
discussion about it.
We were planning to do exactly that.
Maybe you should,
Okay.
would you consider flipping the agenda so that she could talk?
Sure.
I can't talk right now. I have to
Okay.
be leaving now so I can pick somebody up at 7:30.
Okay.
Okay,
That
Laura.
was part of the deal. I was going to say it in the beginning, but I thought that I'd have time. I'm sorry.
Lori, just as a question, would you be interested in getting together with some of our committee members
Yes,
informally to talk about it?
Yep.
Okay,
That'd be great.
yeah,
Okay.
thank you,
Bye, everybody.
Lori.
That was
Bye.
a great presentation, by the way.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we should probably move on.
Yeah.
But thank you very much, Bill, for the...
Just one closing point.
Yes,
when you consider how starved public transit is in Portsmouth and in the state and in the seacoast, it almost forces you to cobble together these co-benefits of many, many different pieces to hope that you can come up with something
Absolutely.
better. So,
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
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 I think particularly for employment, for keeping the younger people into town, keeping the younger people, keeping employed.
Yeah.
Well, what's a good example? Will was saying that his son could get to work if there was a regular transportation there. And incidentally, putting everything on the back of a bike or a pedestrian in all kinds of weather here is too much to ask most people to do.
Maybe one way, but go home.
Yeah, it's unrealistic for most all year round.
I have just one more point, and that is,
Yeah.
I have the sense that with the community, the business community in Portsmouth is losing millions as a result of lack of employment. And I think it's substantial enough to be the engine that drives transportation. Trouble is that the city of Portsmouth does not reach out too often to find out the economic conditions of the city. And now it's in a situation where it's very difficult to even find out how many tourists are in Portsmouth for a variety of reasons that some of the hotels just don't wish to share very much at all. So we don't know much. And yet I have this sense when I look around, anecdotally, that there are lots of businesses that aren't open that perhaps should be, and lots of help wanted signs, including the city itself. And I think the idea that people have to move further and further out, and there's no way to get here except by car, if that. And so people just don't come. They don't come here. They don't come to other communities in Rockingham. And we're not talking about a few thousand businesses. We're
But-
talking about millions of dollars.
But the
That's my
state,
guess.
the state is losing money too.
State loses a ton.
So it's not just us.
So,
I mean,
think-
not the businesses, but the
think
state
there's
is
some-
losing revenue
There's
too.
some work to be done here that's more meaningful than just a bunch of committees.
Yeah.
I think it's in the city, it's in the region, and it's in the state, because if you look at all of those compared to the next neighboring 3 states around, they don't have that problem.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for the organization, too, and the outlining of the different modalities
Yeah.
and scales of transportation is really interesting to understand how we can maybe stitch some ideas together to improve how things.
And we'll make sure your presentation is made available to everybody from more. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
So I think we're going to move on to Larry Cataldo, I think, was going to give us an update on the railroad,
You want to click?
Islington Creek CSX update.
Oh, if it's quicker. That's right, I got a mic here.
Okay.
Okay. I undertook this project to work with the Islington Creek neighborhood because I was a member of the Citywide Neighborhood Committee, and I felt that this was seriously important for the neighborhood to fight what I call a losing battle. I started this campaign maybe about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and it felt like this was the bridge too far. There's a movie by that name. But I think we've made some headway, and there's still a little more to go. So, just click it.
You go over to where it says under the number 7 on the right-hand side. Here, I'll move it over to where.
Oh, yeah, okay.
There until you just keep it on that down arrow and click every.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the fundamental issues are, and have been for some time, for many years, late night, early morning train operations. Well, you say, well, so what? You know, they come through? No, they don't come through. They stop at the Portsmouth Yard, and then they go cross Maplewood back and forth as they switch rail cars. And they do it in the middle of the night, or they do it very early in the morning. And they do it maybe twice a week for a long, long time. The next is long hours of idling. Idling in itself doesn't mean very much if it's just a short time, but there's noise, fumes, And that in itself is a lot of complaints. There's vibration. And the neighborhood around the Portsmouth Yard are just fed up with long hours of idling. The crews are not there. The crews go into this little bunker next to the Foundry garage, and you don't see them, or they go to dinner, or they go to lunch, or they claim they're waiting for the customer to let them know when it's time to go. But they continue idling the train. They don't turn it off. There is a policy at CXX to turn off the engine after 15 minutes. But the pictures of the diesel engines on the bottom are 50 to 80-year-old engines, and in the winter, they have to keep the engines going in order to keep the brakes on the vehicle, on the cars themselves. Not that that would be a serious problem, but that's the reason why they do it, and they have said they've done it. Then there's long-term storage of especially chemical cars that travel occasionally to and from the Newington area where they have clients. And there's graffiti, and as you can see, there's kids on top of the car on the in the picture there. And so it's really possibly an unsafe condition. This has been going on for some time, and we reported it numerous times. All right, we decided to push back. Islington Creek, we've been dealing with this problem for years with Pan Am Railway Systems. They've been arrogant. They, even when presented by the city of Portsmouth, they remind us that the rail laws supersede any state or local laws, and they can, in effect, do what they please. That's not necessarily a reality. When federal government made laws to protect major utilities like CXX, there's also something else in the background to protect the consumer, but that's very little known at this time. Not much has been accomplished. So we had an opportunity to file a complaint or comments before a docket FD 36472 on the merger between CXX and dozens of small railway lines in the East Coast, including Pan Am. 4 of us filed a formal comments. One of us testified in a Zoom hearing in January 2022. In the final in the final remarks, the conclusion, the Surface Transportation Board said that they would, they assured us that they would take positive action, and even the CXX president at the time said that he would try to see if we can come up with a reasonable resolution. All so far without success. In fact, we had a meeting with the city government and CXX and neighborhoods in July this year, and shortly thereafter we've had a series of complaints due to noise and everything else. So actually, with all the things that was said and conveyed to CXX, it didn't mean anything. So very recently, this October 29th, 6 of us filed a formal complaint letter to the Surface Transportation Board. Of interest, we have 50 other residents who are on an informational mailing list. So what do we talk about when we talk about filing? This is a federal agency. They also have community issues. They hold hearings on major subjects, economic subjects, like, and we call those dockets, as you would call these cases in other states. There are parties of record, which our group is party of record. Testimony is given and comments are given on the public record. And of course, there are hearings and distribution requirements which we have to follow. And therefore, every letter or comment that we make publicly we must distribute to all 200 or plus parties of record, including those who don't have an email address. So that's a big deal. All right, the city of Portsmouth put this together. This is in February 2022. You can see that all along the rail corridor, major developments, and I'm not really surprised that we don't hear from them, but any complaints on noise, fumes, or anything else, the residents of these developments are and will be affected by CXX operations. Not that it's common right now in the winter, but it does get very noisy, and it does get very busy. This was presented to CXX, and it just said that we're no longer what we used to be 50 to 100 years ago. We're no longer a industrial zone here. This is clearly a residential and business zone, mixed business zone. You don't have to read the whole thing, but the frequency of incidents for years have been going on. We kept a record, and we put it in this particular complaint. And in one case on the very top, you see called CXX operations politely, and they dealt with us briskly, and oftentimes when we call that number that we were given, they were annoyed. 4 or 5 hours of idling, 4 hours idling, early morning operations, trains occurred throughout the weekends and weeks, and there are many others. We had 2 pages of comments that we filed with that. And this was just since early last year, this year rather. No change in operations, in spite of the numerous interactions we've had with the officials. So we're at this point right now where we're waiting. We filed comments. We filed them, and I addressed them to the chairman of the Surface Transportation Board. We're waiting for their reply. I'm not surprised we haven't heard very much. They have a very full agenda. They have 5 or 6 open dockets, and they've received lots of formal complaints or formal comments. Some of it's in the form of testimony. Some of it is providing evidence and so forth. So we're hoping that we will get a formal letter response or perhaps a contact by CXX in the not-so-distant future. So one thing that we can do is, if we haven't heard by year end, at the end of the year, maybe in January, we have some contacts in Senator Shaheen's office and Congressman Papa's office, and it's our intention to ask them to send a note to the Surface Transportation Board, is why haven't we heard from you yet? And I think we'll get a little action there. And second, and finally, we have one other option. Senator Shaheen's office had informed us that they would be willing to intervene and set up a range meeting with the CXX, and they've done this in the past with other complaints with major rail companies, and they'd be willing to do that for our neighborhood. Beyond this, we don't have any action planned at this moment. We've been hoping that but through our major contacts with the CXX executive people, that we'd get some results. And so taking this final action with formal complaints before the federal board, it was really an act of desperation. It's probably the last straw that we have. So I can't comment beyond the first part of next year. Anyhow, that's my report to the committee. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Larry, for what you're doing and for the neighborhood members who are involved in this. Seems to me you're doing all the right things according to the rules, but these governments often move very slowly, and I think you're right to take this to congressional and Senate leaders. I mean, this is the kind of constituent outreach they should be doing. I mean, it's a direct impact. It's an environmental issue. It's a local nuisance issue as well. So we'll continue to keep track of this, and if you need some of us to do something to support that, I think we can ask the neighborhoods, not just the Creek neighborhood, but other neighborhoods to do something in solidarity with your neighborhood, because something like this could happen to any neighborhood.
How many other neighborhoods are affected by that?
Pardon me?
How many other neighborhoods are affected, do you know?
I don't. The city has shown some interest, but their position is neutral. They will not speak for or against Islington Creek's concerns here. So, and I understand why.
Okay, why don't you explain that? Because I'm thinking, okay, the city
well, first,
should represent all the residents of the city, and if the city,
they
residents
represent the interest of the city, but
Okay.
Occasionally the others. But that's not the point.
Okay.
In 2019, there was a big splash in the press. 2 or 3 of the neighbors went before the city council. They managed to get some sort of, call it a resolution. City council called CXX. They got the city manager to do a few things, and that's when Pan Am Railways told them that you can't sue us, and all the federal laws supersede state and local laws, and so it was like talking to a wall, and nothing much happened after that. It was our hope that we would get the city to back us, but the city also want to, they're participating in other studies that affect transportation, especially rail transportation, and they recently received a rather sizable stipend from the Secretary of Transportation Department, federal government, for work that they did on the Bartlett Street Bridge and bridge area that has to do with traffic. So their neutrality is kind of understood. And that's about all I can say about it now. They have not, they've hosted meetings, but they've never made formal comments at these meetings, any comments at all. It was like they keeping us under tabs.
Well, I don't agree with that. Well, the city manager's met with CSX. She's forwarded the complaints. We've hosted the meetings.
I know you were there.
I think the key to moving this ahead is to get some data. You know, if you could get some data on the noise, monitor it with some decibel thing, and so that we're showing that there's a noise problem, and here's the times, and here's day by day what the actual results are. That would be my suggestion. There's companies in town that do that. You know, I'm not sure. We have no jurisdiction.
You don't.
Yeah. So all we can do is continue to use the docket, use the letter that you've written to make ourselves an irritant to CSX to see if they'll solve the problem. As they've explained, it's in their economic interest to keep shuttling trains here. They don't want to move them down to Rockingham Junction. It's fastest and cheapest and most efficient and most profitable for them to keep this, what they're doing, the same way it is. And we're up against that. No easy way to,
Yeah, I agree with that. We don't oppose their being here. We just would like them to be good neighbors concerning the idling and the fumes, and they can do that rather easily. These engines are so old that if they just replace them with engines that are half the age, that would reduce most of the complaints by more than half. As far as data is concerned, the way the state does noise data, the average value would be about zero, because the trains come in they come in twice a week sometimes, and sometimes they stay all day for 2 or 3 days and then nothing after that. So the state operates on an average, just as they do with traffic, and I wouldn't have any hopes of getting any noise data from a formal government agency. Not the way they do the counting. The way they did the counting on the wall for the highways is they put a noise device in, and then they average it over the 7-day period.
no, I think I'm thinking something like Prescott Park has a firm that monitors every night. And
At the concerts there.
right, and we have to stay below a certain decibel level. And we have a contour for the whole night. And it's really cheap, because you just set the equipment up and it does its thing. But if you had a 7-day contour and you could show, look, here's noise at 3 a.m. on Tuesday, here's something like that. That would be my suggestion.
That does have some merit, I agree.
Because
That
every
sounds-
time you're here, that happens. You can't, when it's not a concert, there's no noise. So the same kind of thing exists when you're not here, there's no noise. But clearly, when you're here, it's disruptive.
And we now, Larry, just to follow up on John's, when there's a concert in Prescott Park, we know when concerts happen. It's predictable, right? But is there a schedule for the trains that you know ahead of time when they're going to be coming, or
I only have an idea.
can we get that? Or
Their operations are based on the way they traffic on the main line. Also, operations are based on the demand from their customers on Newington. It has been somewhat predictable. They usually come 2 and 3 times a week. In recent days, in the winter, it isn't as severe as it is in the spring and the summer, when traffic begins to pick up an awful lot. So a noise counter probably would be an interesting thing to do, but it would be our noise counter as opposed to
official
the city's noise counter or something like that.
But I could see
I would then suggest it to the group.
would you think that CNX might be amenable to say, if we ask them to give us some heads up before trains come? Is that too much to ask? Or
It is. The Transportation Center in central Massachusetts has been running this train system for some years, and it's the same crowd, Pan Am crowd, as before, except now they're CXX employees, and so I think there's maybe some attitude problems there too. Some of the residents have approached them, and they've been very surly at times. So.
Have the developers, that is really quite a striking image. The developers, so many of them with so many significantly upscale large buildings, expressed an interest in this because it certainly would affect their marketability.
I thought about that, and I certainly would like to venture into that zone. They get the property really inexpensively, and they put in whatever housing they can all along there. I'm thinking of like Cass Street, which has 200 or 300 apartment units, and it's right along the tracks. And they're along the tracks because it's very inexpensive as far as property. It's very different. They have to do a few extra things that others don't do, like addressing noise and others. they haven't stepped forward. And but we are thinking about asking at least one developer to, and certainly one of the business firms that are associated with these new developments, and begin that if we have to. But unfortunately, the battle has gone on for so long that people are now discouraged and they have to move on with their lives, you know. And so I've been seeing burnout, and that's very common even when dealing with issues of land use and developers coming in and doing things that are not consistent with the neighborhood. You know, the people just get tired.
So Larry, I'm gonna stop right here so we can get to some other topics. But thank you so much for giving us that update, and I think we're going to keep an eye on that. And maybe if other people have some ideas that we could pursue and suggest to you and help you with, we're gladly do that. So on the agenda item here, we have comment. I don't think we had anybody online, did we? Or
Check Zoom again.
Okay.
No, nobody.
Okay, so let's go on to number 4, which is the other comments, the business that's going on. The first one was the holiday lights contest. Just as an update, the judges are out there judging, and I think the deadline is Friday for them to submit their nominations for the best illumination. And I think our committee is going to be counting those votes on Saturday, I believe, and then they'll be ready for the city council to have that by Monday, so they can announce a winner. So that's the plan. With regard to the Portsmouth House plaque, Elaine is not here, but we had talked to her previously. I think she said that plaque program is still active. They've had, I think, what did you say, 50 plaques that were purchased and being mounted on these houses. So many people, so they suggest that it was a successful effort. Of course, it was probably very much helped by the year we're doing this, but maybe people keep doing it afterwards as well. Our next meeting for this neighborhood committee will probably be, like I said, January or February, depending on the new members that might be joining us, so that we can then decide to elect new chairs or new co-chairs. So we'll wait to hear from the mayor's office about that. As far as our next ward forum is concerned, since Lori's not here, I can't ask her about that, but I would assume we're going to do that right after we've formed a new committee, and then we'll lay out. I think we're planning to do like 2 to 3 forums every year, so that in a 2-year cycle we do all 5. That's usually the plan. So I think that's all I had here as far as updates from Elaine. And I talked to Will before about his interest in trying to get someone to talk about the bike and hiking trail, the Greenway.
Yeah.
And I think you're still working on that, and we might get somebody to come and talk to us about the update on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a presentation that will pair the Greenway with the skate park to talk about kind of how the skate park is connected to the actual neighborhoods in the community, and the skate park is nearing completion. It's looking amazing. It's way beyond what I ever thought it would be. I saw some pictures of it the other day. I think there were some drone shots. I don't know if everyone saw those, but it's really impressive. And I've been in touch with the Seacoast Greenway folks who are making strides to improve that rail trail beyond just Portsmouth, and so I think there's going to be a lot of connectivity there. So I'll keep you posted on who I can get and who will be the best people to present.
Peter Rice is so excited about all of that. You might just tap into Peter Rice, because he's
Yes, he is.
so excited about it.
Yeah, and I think so. I'm good friends with Dave Cosgrove, who's one of the skate park co-chairs, and he had recommended somebody from the rec department, who I guess is going to really oversee that as well. And I had reached out to a couple of people at DPW, but thank you.
You know, I saw I walked over to the entrance of that. There's still 25 feet of water, and the construction people stopped short of filling in that particular flooded area just before the trail begins in Portsmouth here, right next, not too far from the Route 1 bypass. But it's 13 feet wide, and it looks like they've put an awful lot of crushed stone in, and I guess they're going to pave it. They're going to pave some of it. So it's going to be a very interesting thing. Now it goes down to what, Northampton, I believe.
Yeah, my
Maybe
understanding.
even further than that.
My understanding from Peter Rice is that the Portsmouth is committed to paving the Portsmouth section to encourage biking and other
Okay.
transportation that road bikes can go as in addition to mountain bikes and things.
Let's hope that off-road vehicles don't pop up and start zipping over people there. Anyway, okay. I encourage anyone who might know of someone who might want to join our committee in the next year. That'd be great. Also, any other issues that you might have that you'd like us to pick up and talk about. One of the things I talked to a couple of people about is the whole situation with Lister Academy and Panaway Manor, whether that neighborhood might want to be interested in some kind of a charrette or some kind of visioning thing about what they would like to see happen at that site. That might be something if that neighborhood wants to do something. I talked to a couple of people out there. I said, if you guys want us to organize or host some kind of a meeting where we could talk about ideas, we're willing to do that. But we're not going to do it without your support. So, okay, so that's all I've got. Anybody else have any other agenda items? Otherwise, I can entertain a motion to.
Move that we close the meeting?
I was just,
Oh, go ahead.
excuse me, before we do that, I just, for those here and not here who
Yep.
are not going to return in January, I just wanted to say thank you, and it's been great
Thank you, Will, for reminding us.
working with everyone on the committee, and
And I want to particularly express my great gratitude to Elaine, who's done so much to knit together all these neighborhoods. In fact, I just heard somebody talk to me recently who lives down in Port Walk and said, we don't really have a neighborhood here, but we have lots of residents. And I said, well, maybe you could ask a couple people and form your own little neighborhood. It's informal. You don't have to be a formalized, certified neighborhood. You can be it if you have enough people interested. And let us know. And, we'll make sure you stay in touch.
yeah, it's great. It's building community and
Yeah.
connection.
But Elaine has done so much over the past 2 years, and I know she's not planning to come back. She has her own job requirements are pretty overwhelming right now. So, but thank you very much to her for the great effort she did.
She did a good job.
So I got a motion to adjourn. Anyone second that? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned.